Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spraglin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode number 79, Writing with Emotion, How the Book Came About, Part 5. And the story that I've been explaining has been about how it was that I was working to try to find a way to help my niece be able to write in small fragments of time. And amongst other things, I had gotten the bug to write myself, and only having small fragments of time, I was able to reproduce her problem. I could see what the issue was. And the challenge was being able to connect emotionally with your story across the time intervals. So I'd gotten that far, but I had not yet found a solution. At the same time, in a completely different thread, I'd become very interested in the cardinal virtues as expounded by St. Thomas Aquinas and as explained by Sister John Dominic Rasmussen. And I had discovered in that book, and with the additional input from Dr. Karen Vila, that these cardinal virtues were actually at the intersection of psychology and theology. And also by reading Aquinas, who references constantly Aristotle, whom he calls the philosopher, I realized that it's actually the triple intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy. So if you have something where all three of those concentrate on a single group of character traits that turn out to be of enormous importance, you've probably got something there. And in fact, Dr. Karen Villa mentioned the work of Dr. Seligman in the field of positive psychology. Well, Dr. Seligman refers to these as positive character traits because he's in positive psychology and he wants to bring the positive side out. However, my focus was trying to do fiction writing. That was on the back of my mind. And so I thought, these character traits, especially if some of them weren't so positive, might make a good story. And so I found myself connecting what I was reading about the virtues, the character traits, back to the problem I was trying to solve with writing. That's the nature of keeping a Zettelkasten, and that's also the nature of keeping more than one problem going on in your mind. You start finding intertwinings. And when you start finding those intertwinings, that's when some power and some snowballing begins to take place. Well, there was yet another catalyst that came in there, and that was in January of 2023, I signed on to the Scott Shepherd letter. And by April of that year, the 4th issue, there was a writing challenge. And several of the people in the community of subscribers to the Scott Shepherd letter were taking on that challenge. In particular, Stephanie Roy and Terry Grier, who were people that I had come to like and admire in the community, had both taken up the challenge. Well, I wanted to take up the challenge too, but to whom would I write? Because the challenge was to think of your ideal audience and create a document that would give value to your ideal audience. Well, I was writing a chapter book for youth. So who's my ideal audience? The youth? I'm not going to really directly address youth. So I spoke to Scott Shepherd about it, and he suggested, the parents, because it would be the parents that would buy the book. So I signed on to the challenge, and I started writing this document for the parents. But as I was both writing the document And thinking about the parents who are going to want the book, everything suddenly took a complete snowball. I realized that the book that I was writing, which I titled Jonathan and the Dinosaur Notebox, initially had the goal of teaching youngsters how to keep a Zettelkasten, because I loved mine, and boy, wouldn't it have been fantastic if I started it very young. So that was my original purpose in writing the book. But I realized as my story was coming together and thinking about my characters in terms of these virtues that I was studying, I realized that my key hero, my boy hero, had a profound lack of perseverance. And in fact, that was the very hurdle that he was going to have to overcome to solve the mystery of the story, which the story hung on this mystery. And he had to have an incredible amount of perseverance to be able to get through the mystery, and he had none. So I realized that the story that was forming in my mind was actually in some way explicable by these virtues that I was studying. At that point in time, a large number of elements came together. I wanted to find a way to capture not just perseverance, but the other character traits that seemed to define my character. So I was jotting them down on a file card. If you've been following me for a long time, you know I love these 4x6 file cards. So I was just trying to make a list of Jonathan's character traits, and a whole cascade began to happen, bringing in 4 key elements that collectively solved my niece's challenge. So I will pick the story up tomorrow from the point of view of how those 4 character traits came together. But at this point, I'll just wind up the writing challenge in that I found myself wanting to write not to parents, but to young writers like my niece who had put their writing on the shelf. I wanted them to reawaken their dream of writing because the answer to the problem was unfolding in front of me. So the next part of the story will come tomorrow. Bye-bye.